And hey, AI might replace a lot of jobs very quickly. So this will be a very relevant question for everyone. So education, there's so much that the nature needs, and the nature really wants to come back, right?
Mhm.
Soil rebuilds itself if you let it. Forests regrow. The default state of the living systems is actually regeneration. So let's help it.
In a world of hyperconnectivity, we seem more disconnected than ever from the living world. A world of natural wonder that has its own systems in place and masters the art of coexistence. We, humans, have placed ourselves outside this way of living, but it can teach us the biggest lessons and leave us in awe. What happens when we reconnect to the nature from which we arose, move in sync with it, and coexist in a symbiotic way? Will we make other decisions? Will it change the way we perceive ourselves? What and who can teach us if we are willing to listen? We invite you to be open and amazed by today's guests as they offer a glimpse into their art of coexistence.
Today, I will be exploring the concept and theory of systems change with Eva Laláková. She's originally from Prague, but has lived, studied, and worked across Canada, Scotland, and the Netherlands for the past 13 years. Since 2018, she has been part of Metabolic, an Amsterdam-based systems change organization. Metabolic is, and I quote, focused on bioregional regeneration, building the economic, governance, and capital models that allow whole regions to come back into balance with the living world. Beyond her work, she is a lifelong environmental and social justice activist, an ever-curious seeker, and now it is my turn to be ever so curious about her. Hello, Eva. How are you? And thank you so much for joining.
Hi, Daphne. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing really well today.
Excellent. And you're actually in Prague now.
Indeed. Yeah, I moved here a couple of months ago for a bit of a trial period for the time around, a bit of a personal story, but my grandparents are not doing too well. So here I am, and actually very much enjoying the spring in Prague and for Metabolic remotely.
So maybe you're also rediscovering Prague now. I'm curious what actually, because I just mentioned in the introduction that you're an ever curious seeker. What has sparked your curiosity today? And now that you're in an old new place, maybe something in Prague has sparked your curiosity.
That's a great question. Today I spent most of my day working indoors, but I guess what has sparked my interest has been the massive storm that we have had the full day. That's something that I have really missed in the Netherlands, actually. These proper, deep, dark, dramatic storms where you actually do see a bit of a light, a bit of a blue sky on one side, but then these dramatic clouds. And I love it. Love being surrounded by it. And it's a very different experience to the Dutch weather where there is a lot of constant rain, but very little storms.
I see. Yeah. You're really within the elements today.
Yes, indeed.
Very nice. When preparing for this conversation, I had, I don't know how many tabs open on my computer because there is so much to read on Metabolic's website. And you gave me a lot of homework as well when I was preparing for it. There are also numerous links to all projects and the ventures that you are involved in. So what I want to suggest is that we take it slow today. And I'd like to already warn our listeners that we won't be able to discuss everything because it's simply impossible in 1 hour if we look at all the things that you do. But I'm sure that we can cover a solid basis and spark everyone's interest and curiosity. And of course, then they can visit the website of Metabolic afterwards if they want to learn more. Having said that, Eva, I'm curious what you are hoping this conversation will do for the people listening.
I suppose that I'm very intrigued by being able to share the beautiful and deep work that Metabolic has been doing for the past 14 years and is continuously reinventing itself in different directions with a really genuine mission of trying to transition the global economic system to a fundamental sustainable state and really bringing the global environment back within planetary boundaries and really focus on helping the whole living system thrive. And it's something that is so close to my heart, something that I've poured all my adult life into. And I truly believe that it's very important for all of us to listen, to care, to be engaged in one way or another. And I hope that the conversation and some of the projects that I will be sharing and the way we think, the way we approach change, hopefully inspires some people. I'm always happy to have a conversation if somebody wants to connect with me. And simply, we need to build a strong movement. There's so many amazing change makers out there that I know that are also very distant from me, and we need to talk with one another. We need to keep believing that creating a better world is possible. So I guess that's my hope for today.
That's wonderful. So we hope that other people also see that it's possible to have a positive change for an even better world than you're maybe already creating. I think that's a great ambition to have, at least for this conversation, but also a wonderful personal ambition to have, of course. So you're already mentioning quite a lot of words that for some people, for you and for myself as well, they're words that we use on a daily basis, but some of them, other listeners might not use them on a daily basis. How would you describe to someone that doesn't know your work, or maybe someone that's still in primary school, or maybe one of your grandparents, how would you describe to them what it is that you do at Metabolic?
Yeah, that's a question that I've been grasping with myself for a very long time.
I know the feeling. I have that too most of the time, but I'm curious how you would do it.
Yeah, I guess as opposed to the word sustainability, which in its essence means it can keep going. A factory that maintains its current emissions can be treated as sustainable.
I think that's the word to use for it, right? Sustainability is more maintaining it in a steady pace, that it's coasting the way it is.
Yeah, a degraded landscape that doesn't degrade any further is sustainable. But is it though? The term regenerative tries to capture this nuance. It's a different word for a different, stronger ambition. So really leaving the place better than you found it. I think a good example can be a regenerative farm that rebuilds its soil while it also produces food for people around it. Or a regenerative business venture organization that creates more value than it extracts. So really flipping the coin to the mindset in this way, not aiming for less bad, but for better, fundamentally better. And this systemic approach is an interesting one because it really allows you to look deeper into how all the different systems are interconnected. And once you start looking in this way, once you start to approach the world, whatever situation you're in, whatever project you have with the systemic lens, you cannot unsee it anymore. It will always be there.
Can I maybe already ask you then, because you now mentioned systemic change, I think this is also a word that maybe that not everyone understands, or what it means to you. I'm curious. Do you see it as a theory? Is it a concept or a philosophy? Can you maybe give an example to make it a bit more tangible what systemic change means?
Well, systemic change is something slightly different than systems thinking. I think we will get to systemic change throughout this conversation, I hope. But systems thinking maybe is one that's more related to where I was going now, because it's really this discipline, this practice of looking at the whole, not just the parts of a system. So
it's a holistic approach of when you see an issue or when something is going well or it's not going well, that you don't just look at that specific event, but you look at all the other chains in how it came to that.
Exactly. So you can really think about the world as a web of interconnected systems, right? So from buildings and neighborhoods to whole cities, from urban parks to forests and larger ecosystems, economies, communities, supply chains, specific organization, anything is really a system. And every problem that we care about comes from how these parts actually interact. And the reality of the world we live in today is that vast majority of institutions, but not only, also vast majority of sustainability consultancies, for example, or NGOs, still work in silos. So a company will maybe tackle at its best its own emissions, but it's not going to look at the sector or like a broader impact on the planet that comes out of their operations. A government might focus on regulating a couple sectors, but will rarely look at the interconnection. Even the European Union, Metabolic actually has one of our many projects is being an advisor with the Systems Transformation Hub to the European Union, really bringing that systemic element to policy. But I don't want to go that direction. Funders have this tunnel vision. Often, even impact funders, they fund something very specific, and this is part of the problem because it's simply not enough. The world doesn't experience the problems in silos, and these single types of interventions tend to be really insufficient. And oftentimes they create, and I think you mentioned that already, problems elsewhere. So with systems thinking, you first really focus on understanding what the system is, how it interacts, what kind of impacts does it have. And when thinking about shifting it and really looking for leverage points, which are places in a system where to intervene, where a single intervention or a series portfolio of interventions,
where it has an impact to actually drive everything to change, like a domino effect.
Exactly. So it's really about taking that angle. Yeah.
And when you talk about these systems, you already mentioned, but I just want to reiterate, the system we can see this in an organization. It can be in a sector, it can be in a supply chain, it can be in a society. Is that correct? Or?
In a city, in a whole region. It really is about how one defines a system, and it's not about one being a better definition than other. It just depends on the scale that you're working within. And for Metabolic, for most of our existence, we have worked on multiple systems in parallel. We have built hundreds of circularity, sustainability, regeneration strategies for cities, for organizations. We have been active in building impact-driven venture ecosystems, trying to build this ecosystem, this vehicle that is tackling multiple systems in parallel that need shifting, as well as looking at policy and governance, etc. But in the last year, we have shifted our focus, in fact, on a scale of region. So really defining the regions as a system and trying to combine different elements at once. So really pulling several leverage points around capital, orchestration, governance, infrastructure, supply chain transitions, and beyond to really orchestrate a long-term change.
I'm going to slow us down now a little bit because there is already, I think, a lot of interesting terms that I'm hearing. Now, bioregions is one of them that I think needs a bit of attention on its own. But just going back to my primary question, what is it then that Metabolic does? I hear you say that you build strategies for, these can be organizations or institutions or governments. They have a problem and they come with a question, or maybe let's try to make it a little bit smaller. How do we explain what Metabolic does and what you do?
Yeah, thanks for making me go a little bit slower because it's not easy, in fact. I have been at Metabolic for 9 years, and what I was trying to share now is how we have approached our work in the past 13 years of me being there. So analytical tools, pulling in data engineers and scientists and ecologists and designers, economists, venture builders together to work on these parallel work streams around building city sustainability transitions, working with organizations and helping them understand their impact better, and building sustainability strategies, then the innovation ecosystems. What has always stayed the core of Metabolic's approach is the kind of analytical methods that we use. Fundamentally, Metabolic is always about applying systems science, systems thinking, data science, and science-based approaches in whatever work we do. Practically, analytically, we apply analytical tools that help us really anchor our strategies in a deep understanding of the systems that we are working within. One that some of the listeners might know is called material flow analysis. So really following through data the kind of resources, energy, water, money, waste, what is actually moving through a system. So you can imagine in a city, all the things that are produced and consumed, the mobility system, the buildings, what is happening, what kind of impacts does it have? And we also use things around geospatial analysis. We use life cycle assessments, stakeholder and power mapping. There is a lot.
Can you explain how this works? Is there someone that comes to you with a request that says we have an issue? Do you proactively see that a system is stuck, and do you then approach them and you say, let's do an analysis on this, and we look for the right partners to join us to get all the data to improve this system, and this system can then be to improve this organization or to improve a city flow or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have historically had 5 different legal entities, of which one was a for-profit consulting. Just a side note, we have always been mission driven, so all the profit has been always reinvested in our mission. But the consulting indeed worked on the basic model of clients coming to us, vast majority of the time. For example, with our city work, it's been quite easy for us to find cities that are ambitious and driven to work with us, and that come to us and ask for support. But then also something that we have always done was trying to be this long-term partner in crime. So not just getting stuck on the consulting advisory aspect, but really working with our clients or partners long term, helping them with implementation. That has been our long term practice, and the same was with organizations. But the approach has changed, actually.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe there is a project that you are currently working on that we can take as an example. And I know that this is then only one of the 4 maybe pillars of the things that you do. But just to walk us through how what this project is, what the underlying question is, and then how do you approach this as Metabolic?
Wow. We work now fully nonprofit in a steward-owned ownership structure where we see ourselves, our role as an orchestrator of change.
Steward-owned, I think that is already a very relevant term to explain as well, because it's a different way of how an organization can organize themselves. It's a different way of seeing the role of an organization. So I love to hear more about this project, but I also want to take a note that we need to discuss what steward ownership actually means.
Yeah, definitely. I do have to say that governance is one of my passion topics. And in the past 5 years, I have worked with hundreds of startups actually focused on driving systemic impacts, where we have always, as Metabolic in our innovation programs, preached steward ownership as the most as the most epic governance structure that I think is very much related to our vision and to the regenerative economy that we're trying to build. And it's fundamentally around understanding governance as on its own as a leverage point for change. Governance, in a nutshell, really determines how power shifts through systems, right? So who makes decisions, who benefits, who bears the risk, which voices don't get hurt, connected to funding and accumulation of wealth in certain mainstream governance structures. And steward ownership tries to change that through building a legal and decision-making set of structures where fundamentally the control of the organization stays with the people that work there, the people that are committed to the mission or to the cause. And secondly, the profit serves purpose. So purpose of the organization rather than shareholder extraction.
What we hear so much talk about always is that all the money goes to everyone in the boards and the stakeholders and things like that. And that is a really big issue that we're seeing. And then the steward ownership says that is never going to be possible because we are steward-led, stewardship owned. So this means it's going to the organization always, and anything that we earn with this organization or any profits that we make, they have to go to the purpose of the organization and not to anyone in a board or with a higher position.
That's a great. Exactly. I think the really key thing here is that the long-term stewardship is protected legally. So the company cannot be easily sold for some kind of speculative gain, which we see happening everywhere. And that's a really beautiful way of shifting the way, let's say, that the logic of seeing organizations as a vehicle for change.
Perfect. Okay, so we have that one figured out now.
Done.
And that one we understand. And then you were talking about the bioregional transition work.
Yeah. So we see each other as an orchestrator of these transitions. I already mentioned this, I think, at quite the beginning of our chat. I would say at the very top, there is the capital. What kind of capital flows into the region and basically trickles down to what's happening?
This can be money, this can be human capital, this can be resources. This is what you mean by capital?
Absolutely. And the financial capital is an angle or is a focus that we are now much more committed to directing ourselves or through our local partners, because we have learned in our 14 years of practice that this is an element that is always a struggle with any transition initiative. If you don't have the power that capital can give you, you have to piece it together. You have to solve the puzzle. It's always a lot of effort that's put into it. So us and our local regional partners being really committed to driving a longer term transition, being able to actually have a fund that is fundamentally nonprofit and be able to feed the money into projects and initiatives and infrastructure that is needed, that really shifts the game. So there is the element of building new blended finance capital vehicles, so really orchestrating where the money is going and how. But then there's all these levels below. So really connecting the local ecosystem of partners and trying to build new ways of collaborating. Then there is the knowledge element, this knowledge infrastructure that we either provide or we upskill our local partners to be able to apply these systemic analysis that I was mentioned before to really understand what's happening. Yeah. And then to know how the transition might happen. So building scenarios, understanding potential trade-offs, and really piecing the change together one by one. So you can think regenerative agriculture, building innovation ecosystem, looking at the infrastructure that's missing. And it looks very differently in, for example, Ghana versus North America versus Europe, right? And we have projects in these continents.
In all those places, yeah. So we were just trying to get to an example of a very recent project. Which one is it that you would like to highlight?
I would love to talk about Ghana a little bit, because this is a project that I'm very excited about. It's a collaboration that's been now ongoing for about 5 months, and Metabolic, I hope that it's gonna continue for much, much longer. The way we got engaged with the region was somewhat, I'm not going to say the word opportunistic, but it was, I would say, just a nice coincidence where Metabolic CEO Eva Laláková, I believe at some kind of Club of Rome meeting, met with Mrs. Amelia Arthur, who is the Ministry of Aquaculture and Fisheries for Ghana and comes from one of the poorest regions in Ghana called Shama. And the two of them really clicked. And Amelia was absolutely in love with how Metabolic works and the kind of regional work we have been doing elsewhere. And she asked Eva, please, can you work with us? And I'm going to do my best to anchor you institutionally. But hey, we cannot give you the funding. It's going to be a big undertaking. We have to figure it out together. But the kind of impact we can have in Shama is massive.
And her pleas is because it's a very poor region, and her idea is, could you please help us because we need to improve this region? That is the question that she has.
Exactly. I was there about a month ago now for a week. with a few colleagues from Metabolic to get to know our local partners and to support with the systems analysis that we are currently undertaking, which is really the first step of this, but also any project, really building the knowledge. Shama is Ghana's western region. It's a coastal region with 57 communities of a couple 100,000 people. And there's this really significant river, the Pra estuary, surrounded by mangroves, as well as a lot of heavy industrial infrastructure. For Metabolic, it's actually our first African regenerative transition project. And I would say the aspect that I'm most excited about is that it's really partner-led. It's led by two incredible Ghanaian NGOs, ESI and IADI, who really lead the work on the ground. And Metabolic really comes in with this mission, this role of a capital supporter / knowledge supporter. So we really take the angle of focusing on shifting the power, not just in language, but really in practice. So really believing that the local NGOs and ecosystem of organizations and the people have the capacity to take their future in their own hand and do the work. And Metabolic is bringing in that systemic thinking layer, and we have the access to capital.
It's still so very important that it's a local partner, because exactly as you say, there's often this idea that, yes, we from the West, we can say we know how you should do it better, but it doesn't work like that, right? That is not a very systemic approach to say, here you go, we have a good idea, and now you try and do it, because then you're not looking at the whole. So in this specific project, you have local partners who are doing the actual work, and you are supporting them with doing your analysis, giving them the knowledge
and the tools,
and then work on it together.
Yeah, so it's really about empowerment and really believing in this partner-led kind of anti-colonial approach, so to say.
Yeah.
And there's this really big issue with, coastal development work with West Africa, but also more broadly is really donor-led. So there's, some funding, which also has been recently significantly cut off with some of the US steps that they have done in the past years. There's these programs that are fully designed in Brussels or Washington, and then the national NGOs need to implement them somehow and tick these KPIs, these boxes. These communities are surveyed. There's always promises that there's going to be something better, but there isn't. They're not empowered. They don't own the projects. And also, of course, there's, again, this non-systemic approach. So random projects, random initiatives, but not looked at holistically. I was in this incredible national park also for a couple of days, which has, trees that are more than 1,000 years old, and some of the most beautiful trees I've ever seen. And it's there, and it used to be everywhere. And yeah, there's a lot of potential.
So in this specific project, you have these two local partners. What is it exactly that you are bringing in, you as a person, Eva? How are you? What is your role in this specific project?
Well, I am busy with the project management, as well as really trying to pilot this new approach to collaboration in the other regions that we work, in the US, in Europe. We do a lot more of the work ourselves. And in Shama, as I mentioned, it's really partner-led. So 90% of the funding goes to the local partners. So what can we do with the limited funding resources that we have to really make sure the project is steered in the right direction and creates the kind of systemic impact that we hope? So it's really about designing this project, this program in a smart way. It's about upskilling the local partners so that they can do this first layer of the analytical work themselves. It's about building the next steps of this project. So once we have actually produced this package of knowledge materials, the systems atlas, the stakeholder map, what is it then the next step? So developing concepts for some initial pilots that can really quickly bring value to the local communities and to the livelihoods to the locals, where unemployment is so prominent in Shama. It's incredible. So there's a lot of projects that we are conceptualizing, that can have these first quick wins that are designed to build trust before then this harder, more long-term systemic work will come into play.
And how do you see your role in actually finding this funding? Is this something that you do mostly in Europe, or are you looking outside of Europe? You were saying that this is an initiative that you did with the local ministry as well. Are you looking with them and how they can restructure maybe their local finances, or how far do you go?
We are involved with as many institutions on the ground as we can. The local assembly, which is really the governing body on the municipal level, as I mentioned, the aquaculture and fisheries institutional layer as an anchor. And so there is certainly an element of potential way to blend the funding for this program or transition together with getting some funding from the government. But the issue is that the government simply has a very little budget. There's only so much they can do, but they can pool us into West African funder networks. But I assume that most of the funding will come from the philanthropic world in Europe and potentially in the US.
Unfortunately, that might make sense in this case. You were earlier explaining a bit about systems change or systemic thinking, how there's always a leverage point. Can you, in this project in Ghana, do you already see the specific leverage point, what it is that you feel like is going to start this domino effect of, and now we're into the change and now we're having a holistic approach where everything can follow?
Yeah, that's a good question. There is maybe a really nice way to illustrate it around mangroves. I think it can quite nicely illustrate systems thinking in practice and why it matters there. Yeah. So the way it works currently is that women fish smokers tend to cut mangroves at scale for fuel because they do not have any alternative fuel option. And once the mangroves are cut down, the fisheries lose their nursery, and then the catches drop further, and then women cut more. And if you ban the cutting, then these women are left with nothing. They're left with no livelihoods. If you restore the mangroves without the alternative, the loop reopens again. And so if you think about it, we're already getting there, right? So some kind of intervention that could work would be connected to recovering the fisheries, building towards clean smoking ovens that are powered in different means. It's about deep, large-scale mangrove restoration and finding new financial vehicles to fund that as an ecosystem service. It's about building additional livelihoods for women, additional women enterprises, capacity building, and really sequencing this together in a way that makes sense. And this is just, one of many things that I see and we have seen through the analytical work that we have done that is needed.
Yeah, I'm super curious. Do you have very specific tools or methods in how you approach this? Because I can imagine that sometimes you might see an issue or an effect or of something that might be an effect of something else. And how do you then decipher if it's an effect of something underlying, and how do you then get to the actual core of the issue? Because that's a deep work that you're doing, right? Like you were saying in the beginning, that is what you do. You have these very deep analyses. It's deep thinking. So you have to peel off all the layers. Is there a methodology that you use to understand, like, now we get to the core layer? So now we see that this is the core layer because our analysis says so. How does this work?
I would say very specifically in this context, causal loop mapping, causal loop diagrams. So once you have this initial big pool of knowledge and intelligence, you start actually visually mapping the system.
I see.
And so causal loop diagrams can help to surface these reinforcing or balancing feedback loops. And I just gave one example around the mangroves, right? That holds a system in its current behavior that makes it stuck.
You say it's a causal loop diagram. So it's cause and effect and how these all loop in each other. That's how you're
Exactly.
mapping it. Okay.
And in reality, and I highly recommend people just Googling it for fun, maybe some of the metabolics work that we did, it can be intensely detailed, perhaps overwhelming, and then you can simplify it into some nice visuals that anybody can understand, such as the global food analysis that Metabolic did those 12 years ago, which is a really beautiful knowledge piece that still many organizations work with as a kind of atlas of the food system, which is very much based on these methodologies as well as causal loop mapping. And it doesn't end there. So first you do the mapping of really understanding how the different pieces connect and reinforce one another, but then you can model future scenarios, and it can be done in different modeling ways, but it's really about testing how a little change here, maybe with switching the fuel of the women, can lead to an outsized effect elsewhere. So really looking at the futures under different interventions, policy, infrastructure, capital. So then you can play with it, right? And really try to understand it.
Yeah, here I really like the analogy of the Rubik's Cube that everyone knows. Like this block that you keep turning, and at some point you want all the sides to have the same color. And I feel like this is what you're now explaining as well. Like you keep on turning or changing certain loops and causes, and then all of a sudden it has to click. And then you're like, now we're having a holistic system. There shouldn't be any bottlenecks anymore. That's kind of how I'm seeing it. But I thought that Rubik's Cube was a good example that I saw on the Metabolic website.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many examples of when you don't do this, how the trade-offs, intervention or strategy that somebody meant well, have outsized negative impacts elsewhere. And this is something that truly saddens me. And we need to be able to predict these changes a bit better.
Yeah. What are you hoping for the next year for it?
I have really high hopes around first building this large knowledge pool that will be truly owned by the people. This is something that is actually already happening, given that most of the communities were involved and have done interviews and focus groups, and the local municipality is very excited to be able to access this data. It's really about building a knowledge pool that everything can be based upon. Yet truly building towards a longer term, and I'm talking 5, 10, 15 years transition project that has enough unrestricted grant funding so that it can truly be adaptive and resilient on its own, make some significant changes for the beautiful people of Shema that I have gotten to meet, and everybody else that's there.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. I hope that too, of course. But it also sounds like a big part of it still always is finding the funding for it. Is that correct?
Yeah, and actually this is maybe one other thing that I would want to mention, Collaborative for Systemic Climate Action. It has actually allowed us to get started in Ghana with this unrestricted grant funding. And I'm happy to introduce.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I had that on my list actually. So I love that you're bridging to it yourself now. Please explain what this is.
Yeah, so Collaborative is something that Metabolic's founder started conceptualizing together with a few other global sustainability leaders that are working on systems change. I think at this point, maybe 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big undertaking in terms of efforts to actually build it towards something sensible and impactful. And the whole vision was, we have so many organizations and NGOs and change makers that are deeply committed to building a better world and to systems change. Why don't we work together more? Of course, there are some collaborations happening, but not at scale that it requires when we look at the polycrisis that we are in. And so this was the initial trigger. How can we really crack collaboration for systems change?
Yeah, I love that. You see that so many sectors always that you're like, oh, there's all these really great small initiatives. So why do we not all combine forces?
And also, I think really key thing here is how can we stop competing for this limited and fragmented climate funding and instead start pooling capital together and pooling learning and intelligence and people and methods, and really while keeping our own identities, individual identities as separate organizations, also creating in parallel this super vehicle for change. I'm not going to say a new organization, but a collaborative powerhouse which has actually funding and power and is fundamentally nonprofit and that has clear impact goals that it's working on. And so this is something that we started it as a dream project, and over the last 3 years it became a reality. Now, 1 year later of our actual existence, we have 30 organizations, and we have everything from systems thinking experts, not just metabolic, but Club of Rome, Earth for All, Dark Matter Labs. We have regenerative science organizations, policy institutions like Open Earth Foundation, Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance, climate law organizations. We have designers, communicators, funders.
You have the whole system, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's the idea. And so really this is just the beginning. Hopefully the vision is working together, fundraising together, and then actually hopefully really pooling a chunky capital that can allow us to do some epic work and also keep growing where it's needed the most, growing in the global south regions where lots of the impact is happening and where a lot more work is needed, not just in the global west or global north. And yeah, really cracking the collaboration, which is also a project that, in fact, I'm just finishing. I've been, I would say, privileged and honored to lead this beautiful project of building governance for the collaborative. So first, it really started as this dream project and collaboration, and a lot of it was informal and really based on trust and shared vision. But now we have grown already. We have fundraised and we have some capital, and we hope that this will really grow further. So how can we actually make decisions and share intelligence and resources in this pre-competitive way? How can we keep solidarity? How can we grow in a sensible way?
I can imagine, especially because it's then also a global collaborative, and you're going to be working on a global level as well. So how do you decide which project gets priority? Where is the funding going, or how much funding does which one deserve? I quote unquote. Is it not that simple to then say, well, this one is also steward owned, so that's the governance model that we're putting on it, or does it go much further than that?
It goes honestly a lot further. It's quite complex.
I can imagine. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been working on it for so long.
Exactly. It just took us 9 months and like chunky iterations. And it's not perfect, but I truly believe in it. And it's been built to be adaptive and to keep being tweaked on the way. And I would say the beautiful way we worked on this project was turning to nature for advice. So actually using biomimicry to inspire this governance model. We called it the symbiosis,
Okay.
the symbiotic operating system.
Yeah, because with the biomimicry, you're copying models that we see in nature, and you're copying to human nature, basically.
Exactly. So we have first look at lots of different natural ecosystems, and we have some chemists and biologists on the team that really were able to dig very deep into components of these ecosystems that can inspire governance in the human systems. And we have in the end chosen coral reef because it's a really beautiful way to inspire structure of the many elements of what such a collaborative governance entails. Some of the nice aspects that inspired me personally as a non-biologist.
Yeah, no, I'm fascinated.
Well, the coral reefs are truly extraordinary. These super rich ecosystems, as we know, they're not doing too well nowadays, but they have been thriving for millennia in these very nutrient-poor water environments. Exact same situation that many climate organizations face. These resource poor environments, right? Where no single organization has enough resources, capital, capacity, legitimacy alone to shift the needle. And in the coral reefs, there's no single organism. The reef actually builds itself over time, one layer by another layer, through interactions of thousands of species. And at the cellular level, excuse my language, the reef actually begins with a beautiful example of symbiosis. So the corals and the algae, neither of them actually can survive alone. So they need all these other species to create conditions for the entire ecosystem to thrive. So there's all these interactions and engagements that support this reef, and it keeps building itself very organically. If there is a species that doesn't quite have the role to play or a way to benefit from the symbiosis, it's just gonna continue going elsewhere. And this is this kind of microcosm of coral reefs that we have been inspired by, and that a lot of the work is built upon. Everything starting from the way that we actually choose new partners, what kind of symbiosis can happen there, what are they bringing, how can we keep this diversity that we feel is needed to be able to work together and pool different sets of expertise and knowledge in a smart way. It's about this fundamental layer of solidarity, keeping this inherent trust. As a good example is this element that we have currently been practicing and that we still want to keep, which is this golden ticket element, where each organization that's already there has the ability to bring in one new member because they fundamentally believe in them.
As being a partner of the collaborative.
Exactly. There's some principles that they need to adhere to. So in a 30 organization collaboration, we cannot have 10 designers or 10 communication experts. But so as long as it's keeping this prerequisite diversity, there's this solidarity that we trust that this partner will know why they're bringing this partner to the table. And there's going to be some scanning. But otherwise, unless there's a strong veto from somebody, this is how we grow. And there's, of course, these other principles around geographic spread, etc. But there's a lot of depth to this model that I'm actually very excited to eventually share with the world. We are going to first pilot this with the collaborative in the next 9 months or so. And the next step is actually publishing an open source white paper where we hope that all the work, all the research we have done can actually be replicated elsewhere.
And then it's also, I suppose, still a question for you. Is this going to work long term, right? So you're going to probably update this constantly to show how it's working for you if you make any changes in it. Is that how I'm seeing it? Is it a living system in that sense?
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm curious because I really liked how you said that the coral reef, as an example, that it starts really on a cellular level. What would you say is the cellular level of this collaborative? Where what is the essence? I hear you say solidarity a few times. Is that where it starts in its smallest being?
Yeah, honestly, you cracked it. So we have these 3 key pillars that each have a lot of nuance and components. And there are solidarity, which we literally, in the metaphorical sense, call the reef DNA.
Oh, beautiful.
The second piece is portfolio learning in the nature way called the reef metabolism. And thirdly, the actual governance and decision making, which we call the reef skeleton. So you have the DNA, the metabolism, the skeleton. If I could draw it, it would be very nicely visually shown. And the solidarity as the DNA, as you asked, really is this key basis for relationships. So starting with shared identity, a really strong why, this mutual orientation and support, this deep trust foundation that will allow every organization, it doesn't matter how different from one another, recognize each other as compatible partners.
And this metabolism that you say, so the portfolio is all the projects that you do that make it bigger, that makes the impact bigger. Is that how you see it? Which then symbolizes the metabolism in the sense that the metabolism of the coral reef is everything that it's fed by, and then how that is coming out differently and how it supports the microbiome, the gut system of the coral reef. How do we explain it? Okay.
So there is this initial concept of multi-solving through the kinds of projects that actually get funded. So fundamentally, each organization can produce projects, programs together with other partners from the collaborative that they think can have a really outsized systemic impact, but not all of them actually get selected collectively and funded. Why? Because we are trying to choose initiatives that can act on several prominent leverage points at once. So the whole actually becomes greater than the sum of its parts. And then through that, we have this constant stream of learning. We're building some kind of portfolio of projects that ideally would be reinforcing one another and coherent.
Right.
It flows the knowledge into this, we call it the global intelligence layer. So really building a shared map of how the global system and all the subsystems actually work, really surfacing key patterns that no single organization, even metabolic, right, could see alone, despite all of our analytical work, and then feeding it back to the selection of the projects. And I guess this is the portfolio learning component, the reef metabolism. So this continuous flow of action and signals.
But also, it's also a pick and choose of, yes, this sounds very healthy or like a very relevant project to do, but in the whole of the collaborative, this is maybe not the right time and place to add it to our portfolio, because maybe there's a project that is very similar, or maybe because it needs too much funding or something like that. So you pick and choose if it fits if it's going to be better for the whole metabolism, and not just if you can help that one specific project and then be done with it. It has to be
exactly. Yeah. I put it simply, any activity, any project produces evidence and intelligence. The evidence and intelligence, hopefully, ideally measurable, is fed back into the system and produces new action. And this is the feedback loop on its own.
Now, hearing all this, it's very complicated material still, of course, and I know there are so many more things that you do. I'm curious how you describe it yourself. Is it research? Is it theory? Sometimes speculation, but then it's also practical. Is it all of the above? It feels like because it seems like you're involved in so many phases of let's say projects, or let's say phases of driving change. You're there in the beginning, but you're also there in the end, making sure that the things actually happen and giving tools. And yeah, how would you describe it? Or is it art? Maybe can also be.
Are you talking about the broad portfolio of things that I am working on, or the collaborative?
No, sorry, I'm talking in general about what you do and what Metabolic does. Let's focus on that, because I think the collaborative is something that came out of this way of thinking, of how you think, of how Metabolic thinks as well. Yeah. So in this whole conversation that we're having, what is it about? Is it research? I was thinking when I was preparing for it, I was like, a lot of it is theory, but it's so much more than theory, because you're also bringing things to practice. But then you're also saying you're sometimes speculating in trying out different scenarios, but you're also doing them. So you're doing them while researching them.
Yeah, that's a great question.
How do you experience it? Maybe that's a better question.
I would say that I've certainly had some frustration around the lack of like really large scale global impact that, when I was 21, coming out of university, joining Metabolic, or 23, I don't know. I had this vision, I will dedicate my 20s, my life to this mission. I'm the last generation that can do this. And 9 years later of a really hard work and being surrounded by brilliant minds and really, understanding how lots of this crazy world works through beautiful projects and our network, there's just not enough. There's not enough impact. And even in the consultancy work, I honestly do not know an organization that would have deeper, higher quality analytical work than Metabolic on the systemic level. Yet still, brilliant analytic work, brilliant strategies that have been well modeled, still do not always bring the tangible impact, and just not at the speed that it's needed. And so there has been so much that I have actually seen, and please do check out Metabolic's website and our portfolio of all the work that we have done with all these cities and organizations and startups. It's very exciting, but I actually think that as the poly crisis have multiplied, as the climate crisis has exponentially worsened in the past decades, we need to be a lot more creative. And this is also where I see hope myself and where I'm extremely committed to the new bioregional transition strategy that we are taking. It's really about combining analytical and knowledge with with building a parallel system that can demonstrate that a better, different way is possible. Lots of the examples I talked about illustrate that. It's really combining mitigation with adaptation. So let's not be fools. Let's not be naive. Let's actually build towards resilience. Let's put people first as much as the planet that is supporting us. Let's combine it without speculation as much as possible, with any strategy, any new initiative. You never actually know how it's gonna go, right? But you can do your best work to support it, by doing all the preconditioned deep work well, but then also be adaptive. So be humble, be open to failing and to learning from your mistakes. Share the knowledge with others, other like-minded organizations, with everyone. Open source. Make the capital that's funding all these projects and this transition much more patient and long-term. And this is where the real change happens. And there's so much that I see on the ground and so much that I haven't mentioned in this conversation, but I'm hopeful. Daphne, I'm hopeful.
This is a wonderful motivational speech, and I'm so happy that you say that you're hopeful. That is really lovely to hear. And I'm really curious now, is this also when you started, or let's say when you finished your studies, is it what you expected to be working on? Is this what you knew that you wanted to work on, and did you expect that this is how it would turn out?
Well, I would say that when I started studying, certainly not. Shortly after, um, thinking that I would work in an organization like Metabolic wouldn't even make it to my dream space, truly. But when I started studying business and economics in Scotland, I very soon after got hit by the reality and really trying to understand what's happening and being very shocked about how the education is actually treating people's understanding of the global economy and all the things we are not learning, and really committing to trying to crack this, and also focusing in my future steps on connecting my studies with environmental sciences, and then also specifically focusing on entrepreneurship and innovation management as an angle that I was really interested in through my social entrepreneurial work with Enactus, which is the student-led NGO that builds social enterprises. But not to go too far in a direction, when I moved to the Netherlands to study my master's, when I finished it, I was searching, and a friend of mine told me about Metabolic. He was like, Eva, I feel like that could be something for you. And I applied 3 times.
Oh, really?
Yes, rejected, then applied for a position of becoming an executive assistant to the CEO and founder. And again, didn't get the position, but I was offered an internship. This was 9 years ago. And 9 years later, I became a partner and co-director. And, I'm a peer of Eva Gladek.
Oh, there you are. Yeah.
I would say it has certainly been a home to me for a long time. Through Metabolic, I have made some of my best friends. I have built community and a lot of good work.
It's a very strong message of, if you know your direction, keep at it. You were on track. You know that you wanted to be part of something, and you worked really hard for it, and you had the patience for it as well. This is also long-term thinking, I suppose, that you tried 3 times and put the work in it for 9 years. And we always give our listeners a souvenir, so something that they can take with them from this conversation. So maybe we can combine the two a little bit. So do you think that we've covered everything? And is there something you would like to add that we can maybe do today or experience or anything?
That's a great question. What came to mind immediately is a few things that give me hope in this world that we're living in, which is really not easy. And I'm sure that lots of the listeners will know what I mean. Looking at the news every day, and it's not looking very good. But so hope is an activity. There was this quote that the sticker that I got at the Partners for the New Economic Gathering in Lyon. I have it on my laptop, but I don't want to shut it. I don't remember exactly, but something like hope is an action. Keep going. And this is very important. Don't give up and keep educating yourself. Keep also looking at the good. Nobody really knows about it. There's very little knowledge about what's happening in the mainstream media, but positive tipping points are real and are happening faster than we think. We have lived through, my generation has lived through one, which I think is a nice example. The solar revolution, something that become this very expensive, weird curiosity maybe, to the cheapest electricity source in many regions in the human history in 15 years. So exponential problems require exponential solutions, and we have a lot of good ideas and a lot of good solutions that are already out there. But we need to work together. We need to trust in the change. We need more capital and work on the mindset shift, which is something I would have loved to spend some more time on. But, in every region, there's people that everywhere in the world, there's people that understand and that are trying to build a better world in one way or another. And they're doing the work already, right? Quietly, locally, often not recognized at all. So sometimes we have to just find them and connect with them and learn from them or help them. And I would say the other thing that gives me hope is that the next generation is already asking different questions. What I keep seeing around me is that they have a lot lower interest in climbing these corporate ladders that keep reinforcing the system that we have, and much more interested in actually remaking it. So let's keep that going, and let's be bold in, empowering ourselves to change what we're doing. I mean, work is such a big chunk of our lives. So what are you doing and why? What kind of impact can you actually make still? And what is the kind of shift that you might be able to make in a sensible way? And hey, AI might replace a lot of jobs very quickly. So this will be a very relevant question for everyone. So education, there's so much that the nature needs, and the nature really wants to come back, right? Soil rebuilds itself if you let it. Forests regrow. The default state of the living systems is actually regeneration. So let's help it.
So I'm hearing two souvenirs. The one is hope that you're giving us and training that muscle of hope as well to stay hopeful. And the other one is asking ourselves questions. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? is this the way to go forward for a better world?
Yes, I would say so.
Excellent. Thank you so much for everything that you have shared. Like I said in the beginning, it is quite complicated topics, I want to say, and there is so much more that we can talk about. Maybe we can do this another time in 6 months or so, that we can discuss some other points. In the meantime, I suggest everyone goes to the website of Metabolic, but also to the website of the Collaborative. We will put the websites on the show notes, but I can say the collaborative.world is the website for that initiative. Thank you so much again for your time, for sharing everything.
And just last comment, we are going to update our website in the next few months, as we have actually quite strongly reshifted in this bioregional transition direction, as I mentioned. And there's going to be a lot of beautiful new work and visuals and knowledge that we will be sharing soon. So stay tuned and come back in a couple of months as well.
Excellent. We'll make sure to do that. Thank you again.
Thanks, Daphne. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Coexistence, a podcast produced by Ourcelium Publishers. Editing by Axel Frühmann, music by Mark Omen, and hosted by me, Daphne Frühmann. Find us on your favorite podcast app and give us a follow, like, subscribe, and/or share, and we'll see you again soon.